Good morning, good afternoon. For you, good evening. My name is Robert Schmid, also known as Mr.IoT, and I'm the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte with a deep passion for all things digital. This week on Coffee with Ms.Connected and Mr.IoT, we're talking with Monika Mahto, and we're going to talk about blockchain and IoT. But before we get there, Monika, welcome to the show. You are leading our Deloitte Center for Integrated Research in India. So, for you, it's actually evening. So welcome to the show. Thank you for being on late. And how are you doing?
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me on the show. Happy to be here. I'm doing well, all set for the weekend, of course, and really excited about both topics, IoT and blockchain. So happy to take this conversation forward.
So, Monika, let's start off with just talking about what you do. I don't think everybody knows actually how much research we do and how we have a dedicated group that does integrated research, and you are part of that group leading that team in India. What is that group about? I mean, I get a lot of benefit from it, but just tell the rest of us, what is it about and what you do and what you focus on?
Sure. So as part of my job, and more importantly, my passion, I follow developments in advanced technologies such as IoT, 3D printing, and blockchain. And the team really focuses on these cutting-edge technologies, and we try to understand the business implications of these technologies, both individually and together in tandem. So we work with technology practitioners, both in India and in US, as well as with other thought leaders to understand the implications of these technologies, business use cases, and we publish thought leadership based on that.
What was the last piece you just published?
Sure. So I'm actually working on something interesting on Industry 4.0 right now, and we are in the midst of it. So stay tuned for more. We're doing some analysis on the readiness and what's next on Industry 4.0. So we'll be happy to share more on that in the coming weeks.
So Monika, you and I think that's awesome. Can't wait to read that and see what's going on. Hey, look, Kelsey's joining us. Good morning, Kelsey. How are you? So, Monika, I was going to ask you about blockchain. And when we started, so I met you when I visited India a couple of months ago, and I was so impressed by what you were doing that I said, we got to have you on the show. And when we talked about what we could talk about, the topic that came up was blockchain and IoT. Why did you pick blockchain with IoT? What kind of made you decide that's the topic to go with?
Sure. So definitely enjoyed meeting you in person, Robert, and now, of course, meeting virtually again. If you look at IoT and blockchain, these are two really interesting technologies, and we have seen their utility manifest in different use cases across industries such as manufacturing, healthcare, retail, etc. But it's the combination of them which makes it much more powerful, and a lot of synergies to be realized. So in my day-to-day work, when I'm looking at these advanced technologies, I'm trying to help other thought leaders and business executives understand what they can do, not just with one technology at a time, but by looking at where technologies can be converged so that they are able to achieve their different business objectives, whether it is improving their operations, whether it is product innovations, sometimes even new business models. And actually, IoT and blockchain does address some really pertinent current challenges, both in the production processes as well as business models. And hence, I thought, it would be a very pertinent topic, given your expertise on IoT. My little bit of understanding on both of the technologies, I thought it will be an interesting topic for a conversation.
Great. Hey, Monika, great to meet you. Thanks for taking
Kelsey
today. So, you said it's interesting how they work together and how, really thinking of the two coming together creates a lot of opportunities in the marketplace. So when you think about that, what are some examples that you've seen where blockchain and IoT really complement each other and maybe give a 1 + 1 = 3 versus working independently of one another?
Sure, that's a great question, Kelsey. So if you look at IoT, the implementation is just scaling up across both industrial and personal applications. We are seeing it all over. But as the scaling happens, data security has become much important than ever before. Despite the existing security protocols and systems in place, there have been cases of data infiltration and security breaches, which prompts the need for something different, something more effective. And I think that's where blockchain serves as a natural fit, because it decentralizes the security architecture, making it much more difficult to breach. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of synergies to be realized because by using IoT and different types of sensors, different types of data can be collected. And the same can be relayed to, say, a private blockchain ledger where authorized stakeholders have access, and then all the transactions are processed based on group consensus, and there is complete traceability with audit trail. So that really makes the digital supply network really efficient and effective.
So maybe it's just me, but I hear this often when people say Internet of Things, a buzzword. What does that mean actually, right? And I always say it's basically a sensor that gives you data about stuff, and then it gets connected, and it helps you inform or influence your decisions that you make. So really, it's all just about connecting sensors and things and then drive decisions based on that. Blockchain, this idea of distributed decision-making and authority, can you just give us a bit of a one step below that? What does that mean? What is blockchain?
Sure. So blockchain is based on some fundamental premises. One, as you rightly mentioned, it's a distributed ledger system, which basically means all the stakeholders have access to the information on the blockchain. It's a single source of truth. So they're seeing the same information at the same time. They have access to edit it. It's based on group consensus, and a particular transaction will be recorded as legit only when it is verified by all the legit nodes on the network, which is what makes it really difficult to breach. So it's based on a 256-bit encryption, which, if I were to simplify a little further, if a hacker wants to crack into the system, he needs to crack permutations and combinations going to the tune of 2 to the power 256, which I can't even count how many digits it will be. It'll be like trillions of digits. So that's what makes it much more secure compared to the traditional systems that are based on passwords and digit-based authentication methods. And there are different applications that we see, when coming back to Kelsey's question, the marriage of IoT and blockchain. There are several examples that really illustrate how the two can work very well in tandem.
That's great. So what got you interested in this, like personally? Just what makes you excited about this and in bringing this? You mentioned there's a combination of industrial use cases for this. There's a combination of kind of personal use cases for this. So do you have anything kind of personally that you're looking forward to either using blockchain for, because you think a distributed, like you mentioned, that distributed ledger system would help or benefit all of the parties involved? How do you kind of take it and apply it to your day-to-day?
Sure. So by way of quick background, my father is a doctor, and hence I have been very close to the healthcare life sciences industry, especially in the earlier years of my growing up with my family. So if I look at the healthcare and life sciences industry, the mere structure of the industry is such that, if you look at the FDA, it needs like years and years of documentation on research. Clinical trials take time. The effects on medicines, it has to be monitored over a number of years on people with different ethnicities, people from different geographies, etc. All of this is a time-consuming, complex process, and blockchain seems like a really good fit here, because if I think about the major stakeholders or the entities involved in this case, first and foremost is the patient. So the patient has complete control over who has access to her electronic medical records. And she can control whether healthcare providers, health plan providers have access or do not have access to some of those records. She has complete control over the medical information, the health information that is being collected through the fitness devices. So that objective is upfront. Likewise, if you look at the health plan providers, they get complete information on the patient's health, the status of a claim, and then the insurance claims can either be automatically approved, put on hold, or rejected. Likewise, pharma companies, they can be very effective on drug traceability on a blockchain from inception to consumption, while making sure that these pharma companies are adhering to the regulations that they need to. So I personally feel that IoT blockchain for healthcare and life sciences is a particularly good fit. In addition to that, I also see some really pertinent industrial use cases. So on one of my projects, when I was working on research for this industrial products company, which was very particular about the condition in which a specialty material is delivered from point A to point B. The transit time is long, the journey is complex. So simply, sensors can be fitted onto the container to monitor the condition of the specialty material, the physical and chemical properties, along with timestamps, monitor if there is a spillage, if the container has met with an accident, if the packing has been tampered with. All of this information is relayed onto real time on a private blockchain ledger, where the relevant stakeholders, the buyer, seller, the logistics company, the insurance company, they are getting the same information at the same time. It's a single source of truth. So by the time the product reaches the destination, the buyer can be rest assured it's in a condition that it was promised. The seller can be made the payment. It's a done deal. So some of those are like really pertinent use cases. In addition to that, I think we also, in my research, I come across use cases where we see IoT and blockchain being used for luxury goods. So think about like fancy handbags. If you want to control for counterfeits, you want to establish ownership of pre-owned luxury goods, or even premium wines, where they originated, how they were processed. Jewelry items, including diamonds. So that was another interesting one that piqued my attention. We want to make sure you're not owning blood diamonds. So how do you ascertain the source where the diamond was mined and where it was processed? Another interesting one is when I usually... Sure.
I have to, I gotta admit, the reason I smiled was because I love it when there's use cases where I kind of sit and go like, yeah, okay, that really relates to you. I'm sort of like, that's an awesome one, particularly on the handbags. So Monika, just in case, if you're just joining us, I'm Robert Schmidt, the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte, and you're watching Coffee with Ms.Connected and Mr.IoT. And today, Kelsey and I are talking to Monika Mahto. She leads our Integrated Research Center in India. Monika, I'm curious, when I think of blockchain, I have to say I love the example about the patient in the healthcare system where it goes on. I have two questions for you. One, in this whole negotiation, it's not really a negotiation, but in this whole consensus finding of data being accurate, where people, more than one person says that's the right accurate data, can actually in that whole chain or in that whole group of people also be systems? So in other words, can a sensor say that I am part of that chain? That's one. And my second question is, where do we see blockchain and IoT today in our day-to-day lives?
Sure. So that's a really good question, Robert. I think it's very important to include systems in the consensus-based approach. So when we talk about group-based consensus, that consensus can be reached upon by individuals, systems such as sensor-based systems. It depends on what the stakeholders agree upon. And the reason for relaying information using sensors in real time is to make sure there are no lags, there are no modifications, and the right information is captured at the right time, relate to the right set of people. To your second question about where
So a
we
sensor
are.
can be one of those consensus finding entities.
Sorry?
So a sensor can be one of those entities.
It can be. It can be. It very well can be.
Okay, great.
Great. And where we are in terms of blockchain right now, I think we are seeing some really interesting examples. It's still not a mainstream application, but I think in US, if you wanted to book tickets, you could do that using Bitcoins. If you wanted to, get some pizza, if you wanted to buy some gold, these are some really exciting applications. There are these select retailers who are giving that option. One mainstream application actually that I came across was this technology company that actually lets you use Bitcoins to get membership into the App Store. So you can actually buy movies, music, games by transacting in Bitcoins. So these applications are picking up, but still I would say we are at a relatively nascent stage.
Yeah, my question was really similar. I love your example of buying gold. That just sounds like a very glamorous activity. Just gonna go buy some gold. This is where I get stuck too, is when you aren't a large company, when you don't have a huge pool of investment to really go after this space and take advantage. Because as you've really clearly pointed out in the beginning, there are so many advantages to using this and really being on that consensus base. But if I go back to your example of healthcare, if I go back to what you were talking about of the data that I own, for example, of my own health and well-being, how do I and what's out there for me as a consumer to start using blockchain in my everyday life? Are there any companies that are going after this? You mentioned a few applications. Do you have any examples of things that are out there where folks can really start to get to know this and leverage this technology in their day-to-day, where it's important to them personally, gold or healthcare, whatever is more important to you personally?
Sure. So I think organizations are going to definitely make the first move when it comes to the adoption of this technology. As I mentioned, it's still in the nascent stage. There is a certain level of cost and effort involved. So still, I feel, individuals are going to take time. Whatever applications we're seeing right now, these are mostly experimental applications. Select retailers are offering it right now. So really, I think organizations are the ones that will be making the big moves, at least for the next few years.
Monika, I'm going to shift to the stuff that I want to get a little look forward. Oh, I don't know. Is this forward? Is this forward? I don't know. One or the other. Forward. So you talked about the technologies you researched today. Give us a glimpse, and this is probably going to be my last question for you, but give us a glimpse into what haven't we heard about? What's going to be on the agenda next year? What are you and Mark talking about when you visited us here in the US and you filmed some stuff? What are the upcoming things that we should look out for? I'm kind of always curious what research people focus on that I haven't really thought of. So it might not be blockchain. I'm just really curious. What are the things we should look out for that we haven't heard about?
Sure. So I think one really pertinent concept is that of digital thread and the digital twin that we are working on currently. And it works very well with the concept of blockchain as well, because both talk about establishing a single source of truth. There's a chain, there's a connected system. All the stakeholders have the same information at the same time. And what it lets you do is really, there's a digital replica for everything, whether you're talking about a product, a process, everything can be done in a digital simulation. Think about the possibilities it opens up, right? So you don't need to physically validate a product to make sure that it's it's performing as it is intended to perform. How if you could optimize your existing processes using digital simulations? That's a big area. We are seeing some initial applications right now, but we see that we feel that in the coming years, it's somewhat of an unexplored territory, and we would see some really interesting examples coming out of the digital twin concept going forward.
Kelsey, this is scary. There's a digital twin of you and I.
Where?
I don't know. I think Monika has it.
I kind of want to see yours, see if it, has all of the personality with it, or if it's just.
I was gonna say if we'd be on Facebook now, I'd go and have like these things where you could put horns on yourself and this kind of stuff, but they took this out of Google Hangout. I don't think it exists anymore. Anyhow, I'm sorry, it's your turn to have a question, and I interrupted. I was just scary to think there's a digital twin of me.
Digital twin is really interesting, though. I mean, I completely agree with the fact that they're so complementary between blockchain and digital twin, and I think that's what's sometimes hard with this field, but very, very good and interesting as well, because a lot of what you need the technology for is similar, but there's a lot of options for how to go after it and what technology investments to really go after here. So in your research and thinking about some of the forward-looking things, the things like digital twin or digital thread that are very complementary with blockchain, do you typically weave these together and create some synergies between them, or do you typically talk about them separately? Because when we talk with folks and when we're getting folks up to speed on things, it's always one of these things. It seems like an either or to them because they're all very new. But how in the research and in the literature do you try to make sure that they're weaved together and shown as complementary?
Sure. So we would actually always try to see where the overlaps are, and then try to identify the complementary areas, because that's where synergies can be realized. And another important thing, Kelsey, that you brought out is, companies need to think through when they are talking about these entire list of advanced technologies. So IoT, robotics, blockchain, you name it, and it's on the list. They definitely can't do everything. Even if companies can do everything, it doesn't serve the purpose. So just because we can connect devices, we should not be connecting it. The end objective should always be the starting point for any technology deployment. What are we really trying to do? Think through, who are the different stakeholders involved? Are we really looking for shared data access? What will be the levels of access that we will require for these different stakeholders? What are the levels of risks involved? How time sensitive are the transactions? These considerations are really critical when we are talking about any advanced technology at hand, because implementation, verification, all of that takes time. But to wrap it up, I think it's the architecture, combining them, which really brings out the best.
Well, as always, way too soon. It looks like this coffee break is coming to a close. I want to thank Monika for a great conversation. Thank you so much. And please join us again next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern for another coffee with Ms.Connected and Mr.IoT. And by the way, if you missed any part of today's conversation, you can watch the episode again on my YouTube channel, or you can see past episodes. With that, Monika, thank you so much. I know your friend is waiting to take you out for dinner. I hope you guys have a good dinner. So thanks for staying around for us, and happy Friday, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.